Time now for one of our regular features. Every Monday, we take a look back at the week that was and unpack some of the biggest stories and trying to make sense of them. This is the Roundup Wrap, and we have, as always, our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, joining us. Mighty, I hope you had a good week.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the listeners. Yes, I did have a good week. Hope you had one too.
Well, yesterday, I am pretty sure that you were shocked as well as we were to see the provincial police commissioner in uniform, looks like army fatigues. And my goodness, was that explosive or was that explosive? Essentially accusing the police minister and is it the National Police Commissioner, Deputy National Police Commissioner of corruption. What's your take on what you heard?
Well, it was definitely unprecedented, Peter. I was actually preparing to discuss the purchasing of a sports team by the son of a minister and discuss the ethical dimensions of that when this exploded on everyone's radar and totally shifted my focus. So it was definitely something that was unprecedented. And just to bring everybody up to speed, South Africa has serious levels of crime. I think last year we had about 27,000 murders which occurred. And there was a report which came out, if not last year, the previous year, that 80,000 cases had been closed, close to 80,000 cases, murder cases, closed unsolved, Peter, representing over 60% of all of the cases. So there's a serious problem with crime, and it's well known that there are certain neighborhoods where there are gangs which participate in drug activities. We know that there's violence, for instance, in the Cape Flats. We know that there have been certain gang leaders who have been killed in a spat of gang-related instances happening in Johannesburg as well as in Cape Town. So the extent of crime, violent crime in South Africa, even made it to the White House, right, under this false narrative that, farmers are being targeted on the basis of their race, when we actually know that it's an outburst of the crime or an outcome of the crime which is happening in South Africa. So the crime issue is a big factor. General Mkhwananzi himself has been somebody who's gained a lot of popularity because his officers have often been in shootouts with violent criminals, ending in the demise of those particular criminals, sparking debates about whether or not he is crossing into the gray line or even maybe crossing over the line in terms of the responses. And he has been very vocal in terms of that. He's fighting crime. He doesn't have time for niceties and some of the ethical debates which sometimes happen, although there are legitimate questions about that. But what that has done, Peter, is that it has made him phenomenally popular. He's probably the most popular police officer on the continent right now. And this predates this particular press conference. So it seems as if he took the energy of the popular race which was happening in Durban over the weekend. All the media was there, all the celebrities were there. And maybe that may have been something that triggered him, because if he's doing a lot of high-level intelligence assessments, he may have spotted a lot of the people he considers to be criminals gallivanting and having a good time of it in Durban while being the perpetrators of some of the worst atrocities that are happening in South Africa. So I don't know what particularly triggered this event. On Friday, we saw that there was an arrest of a high-level intelligence police officer. That may have been the trigger. Nonetheless, he does do this event where he then says the minister is having conversations with somebody who appears to be a middleman or a dealer who is having conversations with the minister about investigations relating to another gentleman who has been implicated in various media reports and actually right now is under arrest out on bail for some of the corrupt activities. So what the commissioner Mkhwananzi tries to do, the provincial commissioner, is then give a timeline and he was almost making what a prosecutor would make, making the case for prosecution for the minister, for also the Deputy National Police Commissioner. They both denied the allegations, dismissed the allegations questioned the procedure that was followed. But some of these allegations seem to be backed up by evidence which is just leaking onto the social media platforms, and also by the circumstantial evidence around these two individuals and their heavy involvement in
All right. So the allegations
people that he mentioned.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I was just saying the allegations are going to be tested, but as you said,
Yes.
The way that this story was told and the evidence, inverted commas, that he presented seems a little bit too detailed, doesn't it?
I think he had to provide that level of detail to allow the public to go and corroborate some of the things that he was talking about, some of the timelines. It felt to me that he seemed to be frustrated or even agitated by the way that these processes are playing out within the South African Police Service itself, and by the way that he was discussing some of the bureaucratic bottlenecks. He seemed not to have a conviction that these issues will see the light of day. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of implications within the policing system in South Africa with the underworld. If you recall, Jackie Silebi was involved with the criminal underworld, and he was a national police commissioner, passed away a few years ago. But the history does suggest that, you know, with the fall of Jackie Silebi, you didn't necessarily have a cleaning up of the police force. You know, a national commissioner doesn't get that in depth in terms of relations with the underworld without there being some other kind of support infrastructure. So it felt to me that the way he was presenting all of this detail to the public was the action of a man who's either desperate or fearful for his life, or trying to give the public its own forum to investigate and crowdsource almost the last leg of investigation so that the information is in the public domain. I've never seen such a senior police officer acting like a whistleblower in this nature. It would have been a typical whistleblower report, except for the fact that he's a high-level police officer who has been involved in these type of high-level investigations. And now the question is going to be, what is the South African president going to do about it, Peter, when he arrives? Because if he were to remove or ask his minister of police to step aside or take a special leave, that in and of itself could trigger some other events, because there are people who are also facing other allegations within his cabinet, including even the other minister that he was traveling with to Brazil. So this is a serious moment for President Ramaphosa, and it may very well be that Mkhwananzi has the support of other senior officials within the police force. And this could be, you know, we've been seeing some events playing out in Zimbabwe where people show up in military fatigues and try to call for protests and have the public imagination. Those people didn't get the same level of response, but I think we may see, if Mkhwananzi were to come a week later and say Ramaphosa has failed to act and talk about Phala Phala and call for some kind of public action, that could totally take this thing in a different direction, which is why it was so unprecedented, even beyond the criminal allegations that he was making, which are yet to be tested, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, visually, one thinks, of course, of the military juntas in West Africa, but this is not a small thing. On his level, it's the third highest ranking police officer speaking about the second highest ranking police officer and the police minister. So the president certainly does have a headache. Somebody needs to get fired, either Mkhwanazi himself or the other two, but somebody's getting fired over this. This is for sure, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, let's move on to BRICS. BRICS leaders have called for reforms of global institutions, a shift away from Western-dominated systems. Where have I heard that before?
You've heard it before from the same institutions over and over again. It's a remix, actually, of everything they've been saying. So the argument in and of itself is legitimate. You do need to have reform of these institutions. We have seen how the World Bank, the IMF, at different times through their structural adjustment programs have caused a lot of problems in Africa. And Zimbabwe had this economic structural adjustment program in the early 90s, which didn't help the Zimbabwean economy, and in fact buried it at a point where It needed more stimulus than austerity. We're seeing the protests with the youth in Kenya. One of the hidden lines of conversation, which doesn't get discussed as much, is the fact that the austerity measures that Ruto has been implementing as a result of the IMF. So all of these criticisms are fair. The dollar dominance on the global market does give America this bully power with the global economy and does allow the global economy to keep bailing out the American economy at critical points. So I think at this point, what we would have expected is more action from BRICS, because as you've said, we've heard the rhetoric over and over again. But I think one of the reasons we're not seeing that, for instance, is because China and India don't actually have the same commitments to this type of, global restructuring. At critical moments, what you'll find is that India will take sides with America, will go and try to get deals for manufacturing, for iPhones, for example, for themselves versus China. So I think those types of internal rivalries are now beginning to show. And at this point, if they were serious about the BRICS currency, which has been touted and spoken about, its merits is spewed left, right, and center, but we have not yet seen materialize. So I think the arguments are fair. BRICS is at a point now where if they want to, put their money where their mouth is literally and make this currency and get going, everything is in place to do so. It may very well be that they're afraid of doing so under a Trump administration, because we've seen that he's been very belligerent in terms of how he's been responding to a variety of things. But in particular, I think there's a video that circulated about him talking about this particular currency and how it shouldn't see the light of day. So they may just be, the BRICS as an institution or as a collaborative set of nations can outlive the Trump administration. So it may very well be that the assessment has been that we need to, keep our cards to the chest for now and outweight the Trump administration and see what we can do. But the rhetoric, Peter, has been ongoing. We've heard it 1,000 times.
We live in hope. Okay, so Rwandan President Paul Kagame seems to have poured some cold water on this US brokered peace deal between Rwanda and DRC, and by extension, what's been happening on the east of the country with the M23 in particular. They say, look, we'll keep our end of the bargain, but we're not going to mess around. We will retaliate if we have to, if we are provoked. And I suppose all the right things are being said, but it does cast a bit of doubt as to whether this thing is going to last, right?
It definitely does. And I was not actually surprised that Kagame would be the first person to start building a narrative to justify his withdrawal or his whatever he's planning to do or preparing to do. So the idea that the DRC army or somebody will start playing tricks is how he described it. He says, well, we'll stay in this thing unless they start doing tricks, and then we never know what's going to happen. So I was not surprised. One of the concerns we've raised quite frequently is just that the peace process here has been attempted so many times, and we were surprised that the Americans were able to pull it off, and perhaps they will be the ones who will be given the credit for pulling it off. But this rhetoric coming so soon after the signing of the deal, and the fact that we didn't have the presidents themselves sign the deal, for me, I think indicated that there was still a desire to keep some distance and to signal to the different populations that, we're signing this. The Americans are making us sign this thing, but make no mistake about it, we still don't see eye to eye. It wasn't quite the signing process that I thought it would be, and that was something that I raised as a flag. And now Kagame is speaking in this rather confrontational and shady manner at this stage. I think it just shows us that the concerns that we raised were genuine. We'll have to see whether or not tricks then manifest and accusations of tricks manifest. But still early days. We'll have to wait and see.
So we go to West Africa now. The Transitional Parliament has passed a law allowing junta leader Assimi Goita to rule without elections and potentially remain in power until 2030. Your thoughts on this? Does that mean democracy is under threat in Mali?
I think it means that they won't have it foreseeably until 2030. But whenever I hear these military leaders say these type of things, Peter, I'm just reminded of Mugabe. I'm just reminded of Bashir. I'm just reminded of a lot of people who came in claiming that they were going to be the liberators, that they were going to be the ones to usher in, the voice of the people and let the voice of the people be what guides them. So at this point, I think that the Mali Democratic Project is dead unless we find other ways to resuscitate it. We cannot assume that these are genuine sentiments. We cannot assume that this is what is actually going to happen. To make such a claim, 5 years of not being challenged, of being an autocratic regime, really is something that I don't think is warranted. The question then really becomes, how committed are we to democracy in Africa? How committed are our institutions to democracy? Because as things stand right now, the entities that should be calling this out, the powerful nations and the powerful bodies, they should be leading the charge and actually saying we need democracy in Mali tomorrow, not in 2030. And we can't have juntas continue to buy time and come up with excuses over and over again that they will provide democracy, not now, but later. They've just got a few things to solve. I don't think that's acceptable.
All right, and that's where we'll leave it. So much to talk about with our continent, always keeping us busy. Mighty Jamie, always good to talk to you. Have a fabulous week ahead, my brother.
You too. Thanks for having me. Good week to the listeners and viewers.
Thank you. That's Mighty Jamie making sense of some of the top stories that played out across the continent in this past week. And he'll be back next Monday morning, around about 6:15. Right now, though, it's time for your news headlines. Here's Matapelo Mahapi.